on behalf of all of us present here, I welcome dear Anita Nair to this conversation.
Thank you, Shanti. Good evening, everybody. I'm so delighted to be here to talk about my new book and anything else that Shanti wants to talk about.
Ma'am, I think I'll begin with your amazing range, the seamless movement across genres and registers, from contemplative, philosophical, and politically alert writing to the mythological, and then the nail-biting kind of crime thrillers. So, and added to this are your multifarious interests in music, dance, cooking, then Kathakali, Sopana Sangeetham, Nalacharidam, Attakada, whatnot. So how is this movement, how has this been possible? And is it this range that has always resisted labeling you into compartments like feminist writer, activist writer, children's writer, and for that matter, any kind of labeling?
So I'd like to start off by saying that the one thing in life that gives me total and complete joy is the writing process. It's not about what comes after, being an author, going to literary festivals. All of that is the icing on the cake. You can have the icing, and you can sometimes just have the cake without the icing. But for me, the writing process is the most exciting thing that I have discovered in my life. And it surmounts anything else that I've done in my life. But I think this writing has to be fed by multiple areas of interest. If I were to just write about one particular kind of writing or a style of writing, then I would be repeating myself again and again, and which is something that I am loath to do, because I do not like to, let's say, replicate what I'm doing. So every new book that I write, I want it to be a benchmark for myself before it is a benchmark for anybody else reading it. So which makes me explore different kinds of styles of writing, different genres of writing. It makes me look at concepts that are not regularly written about. It then makes me, look at things that writers sometimes shy away from writing about. And because I am somebody who believes that writing has the power to change things, I believe it's my fundamental responsibility to write about certain things that maybe writers don't perhaps want to kind of, challenge that sphere of thinking, really.
That indeed is something from which young writers can tap their energies, from how to tap resources, the resources of reading. So when we come, the same range is evident in all these 6 novellas of this particular collection too. And coming to this collection, these 6 stories, you describe them as the state of the nation stories. So shall I ask you, what was the inspiration behind this? Why these stories and why now?
So, a very long time ago, in fact, I've written about it in the preface of the book. There's this very well-known crime writer called Ian Rankin. And in the context of some of my work, he and I are literary friends. So we have never met. He knows my work, I know his work. So in the context of my work, at some point he mentioned, he used a phrase. He said, Anita writes state of the nation stories. And I was very curious about what he meant by that. And then I began thinking about it, and I said, have I really set out to write state of the nation stories, or should I now consciously try and do a state of the nation book? And then, so this kind of lurked in my head for some time. And then, like all Indians, I'm sure, or most Indians, the last 10 years in our political climate has been quite tumultuous, in many ways. I'm not just talking about politics. I'm talking about the impact of politics on the lives of average people. And I just had this notion that perhaps what I should do is capture how the political has a major impact on the personal lives of people. So to most of us, we think that politics is something that happens in the state capitals and in the nation's capital. We think that as ordinary people, average citizens, our lives are very removed from politics, and this brings in us a certain state of apathy, where you think that it doesn't concern me, it doesn't affect me. I'm only interested in the government if they increase my ration supplies from 1 kilo of sugar to 3 kilos of sugar and that kind of thing. So it becomes very selfishly driven. But what I wanted to talk about was how each one of our lives is affected by the political decisions, the societal tapestry is affected by it. All of that happens, and we believe that it's not happening to us because we don't see it, don't see a direct action, a reaction. But the truth lies that this is what I try to explore in these stories. Now, for instance, you would think, how does demonetization figure in a story like Why I Killed My Husband? Or you would think like, why would the CAA agitation, the Citizenship Amendment Act agitation that took place in Shaheen Bagh, it began in the Shaheen Bagh, how does that affect a story like The Little Duck Girl, which is set in a tiny little village in Kerala? Or what about the Hathras rape, which happened in 2020? And how does that play out in today's time if you were to take a mythological look at it? Now, here, just to give you a context, I'm sure all of you here know the story about Draupadi's Vastraharan, where her clothes are taken off. Now, a long time ago, I remember watching a film where, I'm sure it was the screenplay writer's interpretation. I'm not sure if it's a real, legitimate, if there is anything legitimate about mythology, but legitimate mythological understanding. So there is a scene where somebody asks Krishna, why is it you waited for all her, saris to keep being pulled away till you appeared and kind of stopped it? And then he says, she didn't surrender. All through while the clothes are being pulled, she was holding her hands to her bosom to cover her modesty. But at the last point where she opened out her hands and called Krishna for help, that's when Krishna decides to appear. And I thought, what a patriarchal statement to make. Because you offer help to somebody when they need it. Don't wait for them to, kind of say that I surrender to you and only then I will help you. So this is a point of view again that I wanted to bring about in a rape story, which is based on an actual true life rape that happened in Hathras, where these two young girls, Dalit girls, go out to use the fields because they don't have toilets. They go out to use the fields. Upper caste boys find them, rape them, and then hang them up on the tree. And I think in 2020 this happened. It was a lot of news. But after that, 3 months later, everybody's forgotten about it. So one of the things I believe in doing as a writer is to take political activity that is, or things that have happened because of a certain kind of political mindset, and try and talk about how this enters into the personal life space of each one of us. It shouldn't be that our political engagement is only when our ration supplies go up and down, or the price of fuel goes up and down, and things like that. Everything that is happening in the country should affect each one of us. So it's basically about also saying that our lives are not ours alone. It's also everybody else's life.
Talking about that political apathy, I believe all these stories, for all those of us who have read them, she has succeeded, the writer has succeeded in shaking us out of that comfortable zone of political indifference that most of us are into. So, and most of these stories, ma'am, I believe, they pivot around two kinds of sins. Sin of apathy that you are talking about, as in the case of Balram in Field of Flowers, and then the sin of denial in the case of Sri Raman, who is there in The Little Duck Girl, the protagonist. So how do you distinguish between the two? Or are they two separate ethical positions, or are they just different stages of the same kind of refusal to politically engage?
I think it is the same emotion, different dimensions to it. Apathy being where, it doesn't even kind of occur to you because you think it doesn't concern you. And indifference is basically, even though you realize it is happening, you're indifferent to it because, again, it comes back to you and you think, it doesn't affect me personally, right? So they're just two dimensions of the same state of being, which is what worries me very much as a writer, as a citizen of this country, and as a human being, that we tend to be so indifferent to anything that doesn't concern us. Our energies are spent on silly things of, creating an image for ourselves, an aura for ourselves, and all of that, as if we need public acknowledgement to make us feel that we are alive and breathing. But we can be alive and breathing by not being indifferent, or kind of saying, or not kind, by saying that I am not going to be apathetic to what is happening. So speak the voice that you have within you, so none of this, so in all honesty, this book is not really about trying to make people become more politically active. This book is really about trying to make people think about various things that happen to us in our lives and how we don't really take a stand on it because we think it doesn't affect us personally. Now, one of the things that I would like to mention from this book is, now all of us, for now more than 30, 40 years, we've been talking about the reservation quota, and there's been so much of opinion about the reservation quota. Is it necessary? Is it giving somebody an undue advantage? All of that. So I'm not getting into that part of it. What I would like to talk about in this particular story that I have is about what happens to children who get into a professional college or an institution based on the reservation quota? How are they treated once they are in that institution? We never talk about that because we think our responsibility ends from at the point when a reservation quota is allocated and a child has the opportunity to compete with a more privileged child and therefore enter a professional institution. But then what happens to them thereafter? Once they are there, the kind of, let's say, discrimination that they have to face, the kind of taunts that is hurled at them on a daily basis, not by just fellow students, but also by the teaching community there, all of that eats away at the child. Now, all of us know the story about Rohit Vemula. We all know what happened to him. And there are so many such children around the world, around the country. If you take a look at it, professional institutions, whether it's in Rajasthan, or it's in Bombay, or it's in Madhya Pradesh, or it's even in Kerala, you see that there are instances where discrimination happens because a child has entered a professional institution based on their caste. So that is held against them. So there's no escaping it. And many of us remain indifferent to it. We don't want to engage. We don't want to talk about it and make a ruckus about it. So this book is actually a call to action without really being a call to action. I can only create some kind of response in somebody if I can make you feel what my characters are feeling. So if you can go through the experience of my characters, it's going to make my reader want to re-look at everything that is around them.
So all these political contexts that you've been mentioning, the context, then again the land of lost content, where you have the political context of the digital arrest, then Shama's sexual assault in the field of flowers, then again the context of political murder in Twin Beds. All of these, they generate a kind of a visceral dread, in fact. And this was quite there in almost all of your works, because all of them are in a way socially and politically committed. The crime fiction of yours, they have already dealt with child trafficking, issues of gender violence, then urban decay, all of them. And talking about this kind of an activist political domain and touch to your writing, Arundhati Roy has, she has rejected the label often given to her, writer-activist, saying that it's a kind of a sofa-cum-bed term. So what do you think about your own political engagement? In a way, where does literature end and activism begin? Of course, as you said, all of these writings are political without being polemical to any extent. So where does literature end and activism begin?
So I think all literature has to be a reflection of the times that it captures. And if I was writing a fairy tale, then I could then completely divorce, any kind of political thinking from the fairy tale, and just stick with existing tropes and existing mindsets and so on. But in this case, I cannot do that. I am somebody who belongs in this world, who lives in this world, and I cannot, as a human being, close my eyes to what is going on around me. The only tool that I have or the weapon that I have in my hand are words. So I would really like to use words to talk about what is happening around us, not because I believe that writing can create revolutions, but I believe that writing can start the process of change. And if I can present, like in the olden times, when the story of Panchatantra, if you look at it, why was it written? It was written to teach the princes the art of governance. And how do you understand what is fair and what is unfair? So here, when my writing comes from that thought process, that what I write should be more than just a story. It has to be something that is able to talk to my readers and maybe make them re-look at things that they have always taken for granted, or maybe make them look at things in a different way, a different perspective. That probably is going to help bring about this change that I hope will come about someday.
So that perfectly explains, I think, why her writing is lyrical without being evasive, political without being polemical, and compassionate without allowing us to turn away from our comfort zones, in fact. So discomfort is also part of the entire process. And as I look into it, especially the aesthetics and the literary touches around, there is a deep sense of place in all of your writings. Your native Mundakottu Kurishi, reimagined as Kai Kurishi, appear again and again, right from The Better Man to this particular collection. Then there are characters who travel across your books. We have Mugundan being recalled in the story, The Little Duck Girl. And then Basi, the house painter, one screw loose Basi, he also appears again. And then so I have often felt that Kai Kurishi is more or less like A.K. Narayan's Malgudi, Hardy's Wessex, William Faulkner's Yoknapatawa. So how is this conscious world building a world, coming back to the hometown, how does it help your storytelling?
So I guess, when I created this village called Kaikurushi in my first novel, The Better Man, what I did was try and capture the spirit of a small village in the Valluvanadan area, which is Palakkad area, and try and kind of capture the various elements of it and try and build a world which is which is the epitome of a Valluvanadan Gramam, as they call it, and at the same time is also a fictitious space which allows me to do what I want with my characters there, because otherwise it's going to be like, because I still go there, every 6 weeks I'm in my village and my parents live there, and everybody is going to be trying to second guess which character comes from which family. So I just needed the physical space, the look of the area, what it looks like, the mountains, the hills, the mountains, the fields, all of it. So accordingly, I created this fictitious space based on the actual topography of my village, and then set about populating it with people that I created. So in that sense, I became owner of that property without anybody else being able to claim any kind of right to a character.
But she's not a regional novelist. Mundakottu Kurishi as Kai Kurishi may be the emotional home ground, but your fiction travels beyond. There is the gritty, seamy side of Bengaluru in Inspector Gowda's crime novels. Then Chennai appears with an altogether different kind of rhythm. There is the South Indian village in Kota Girls here in our collection. Then the North Indian village in, Flowers, Field of Flowers, exactly. So there is this constant shifting of places with equal conviction. How do you shift across the different kind of a larger geographical mapping in your works?
So one of the things, and which is something that I generally advocate to people who are trying to write, is that to some extent, at least when you begin, write about what is familiar to you, the places that are familiar to you, because ultimately that's what is your beginning, your starting block. What is the landscape that you're going to set the story in? What is the context? And so for me, I started off writing about Kerala and Chennai, because these were the two places that I knew the most. I knew everything about it in terms of language, in terms of the culture, in terms of food, in terms of idiosyncrasies, all of that. But over a period of time, the more time I spent, let's say, in Bangalore, I started writing about Bangalore. The more time I spent in parts of India which I hadn't been to until then I started understanding a little more about that culture and that space to write about it. Nevertheless, in the story of A Field of Flowers, which is set in Uttar Pradesh, in very close to this place called Hathras, I sought the mythological space there simply because I wanted to rewrite the story of Balarama and Krishna and Draupadi, but at the same time using that rape as a point. But I don't know enough about Hathras to write about it with authority like I would be able to write about Chennai or Kerala. So in that, for that reason, I chose to do this retelling of the a mythological aspect of the Mahabharata.
So that's how these inherited stories are getting reworked in order to address contemporary realities in your work, I believe. And yeah, just as wide your external landscapes are, as the exploration of a wider inner terrain of the human psyche, for instance. So the psychological complexity of Madhavan in the titular story, Why I Killed My Husband, and the relationship between the man and the woman, Anjali and Madhavan, the disturbing kind of an inertia in Sri Raman in The Little Duck Girl, all these unfold with a subtle kind of a greater nuance. So can you talk about these men whose moral failures are quiet, are inward, and disturbingly ordinary? We can very well relate to that, but it happens.
So, like I was speaking in the earlier session, I was talking about this whole concept of invisible violence. So a lot of us talk about the physical violence, that is, you have wounds to show for it, bruises to show for it. But there's something that also happens, which is a daily chipping away of self-worth. And that usually happens with women, in the sense that I'm not saying that men are not subject to this kind of routine humiliation. Men also are. But if you look at statistics, you will find that women are subject to it more than men. And unfortunately, because we still, despite all the literacy, despite everything that's happening, we still live in a society, in a country where women rights are still a big question mark. Especially in suburban and rural India. In the cities, yes, girls can stand up for themselves, women can stand up for themselves and do it, but it's very difficult to go against a village. Just this morning, I was reading about this young woman, 24-year-old woman in Karnataka, in Raichur district, 5 months pregnant, whose throat was slit by her father-in-law because she was fighting about some family property. So you see, what happens is that these are things, and this is just one case. If you look at it, there is a very frightening statistic. I can't remember it exactly, but something like to the effect of, I think, 30 women are killed every day on a daily basis in India, or something to that effect. It's a very frightening number. I don't know it exactly. But these are things that we never talk about, because these are what you call invisible violence. You have the visible violence where there is always a body to show, or there are wounds to show. But what happens to people who have to live with it? And you can see that especially in women in their 40s and so on, you can see how there is a certain dulling that comes in them. They start they lose interest in everything. It's that apathy that comes into them because they have been left with nothing to call their own. The only thing that they probably have is self-respect, and that has been chipped away at on a daily basis. It's like water wearing down stone. So pretty much like that. So when I was writing about that, I didn't want to talk about men who come home drunk and beat up their wives, or men who are, flagrantly having an extramarital affair or something to that effect. I wanted to talk about the routine humiliation that happens in homes all around the country, and not just in our country, but all around the world. So the condition that I'm talking about, this invisible violence, is not just for the Indian woman, but it could be for a Spanish woman, it could be for a Finnish woman, it could be for a Thai woman, it doesn't matter. But this is something, because of the way the world is structured, the way gender relations are, and etc., all those things, we still have a long way to go before we can actually say that this invisible violence doesn't exist. So I had to talk about this contrast. I had to create characters like Madhavan and Sri Raman, so when you see them in your lives as a reader, you might encounter them in your lives and you instantly understand, I mean, this is also a form of cruelty. You don't have to always raise a hand to slap someone, to inflict a blow. You can just do it with words. You can do it with indifference. You can do it by pretending to not hear them, or when you have I'm sure you would have noticed it, if there is a conversation going on, and this is really nice man, but he has a way of talking down to his wife. So that is violence too, as far as I'm concerned. That is invisible violence, because 3 times she will speak up, the 4th time she's silent, and then she'll stop talking. And after a while, she doesn't have an opinion of her own. So that is what I'm trying to talk about.
So, as the writer herself said, all these stories, in fact, they unfold in familiar domestic spaces and relationships, but they are anything other than being comfortable. So, we'll come back to something very comfortable. I don't deny that even here there is politics. I'm talking about the food and culinary metaphors that abound in your fiction. For instance, the novel, Alphabet Soup for Lovers. The entire novel is structured entirely around food. Each chapter is titled in an alphabetical order after one particular dish or ingredient. We have Adisiyappalam, Badam, Cheppangaranga, and the same thing happens over here too. For instance, Vadam in Why I Killed My Husband, Ulli Chamandi and Dosha in the Little Duck Girl, beef biryani in Kota Girls, Tandai, that's how we pronounce it, Tandai in Field of Flowers, even the indigenous Ara drink of Bhutan in twin bits. So food for you becomes memory, desire, politics, and also place. How did you develop this sensitivity to food as a narrative language?
So I think one of the things that makes me really angry is when people say that I don't care what I eat, just to kind of keep body and soul together, which is the most lazy statement to make, because either you have a problem, which means that you need to get yourself sorted out, or you haven't eaten good food. So the thing is, I believe that if you have eaten good food, you realize what goes into it. It's not just the ingredients. There is the politics of the person making it, the thought process of the person making it, the love or the lack of love that is appeared very vividly apparent when you eat something, and when something is created like an industrial kitchen, and then when something is created because you are so much in love with that person and you want to give them this magnificent dish to eat. So I think food has a lot of politics in it which has not been explored, and I just like to, because I'm somebody who believes that good food is a good thing in the world. I mean, the world would be a sadder place if there wasn't good food. Then I really believe that when I write, I like to carry through my love and sensitivity for food in my writing as well.
So I think some of us, including myself and my own teacher, Nagesh sir over there, we have 1 or 2 lessons to take from this. as she keeps on nodding at me. So we'll move on to something else. The kind of, the vividness, the attention to individual details that are there in your work. It's like an entire world coming around and gathering around some very small, intimate moments. For instance, Kamalamma combing her hair with the lice comb that is there in Quota Girls. Then again, Pushpa sweeping the courtyard with the broom in The Little Duck Girl. So these moments, they linger long after we have completed reading these stories. So could I please request you to read out to us these passages?
Yeah. I'm just going to read tiny excerpts just to give you a sense of. So this is a scene from the story called Kota Girls, and it's about this woman who lives across the road from the protagonist of this story, Umashri. And Umashri is a tiny little girl at that time. Kamlama, who lived diagonally opposite them, was sitting on a large stone outside her door, combing her hair with a lice comb. When she found one trapped between its teeth, she teased it out with a nail of her thumb and squashed it. It was a most satisfying thing to do, and whenever Umashri's mother combed her hair for lice, she demanded that she be the ones to squash the little devils into a bloody mess. Why should you have all the fun? She would demand. Amma would grin and let her. So vadam is, for those of you who don't know, it's like a fryam that you kind of cook and fry and eat. In Malayalam, it's called kondatam. So this is the protagonist of this story when she's reflecting. This is the story, Why I Killed My Husband. And so this is the passage. Come to think of it, sex and eating a vadam are pretty much the same. Vadams require elaborate preparation, mixing the dough, shaping it into coils with fingers or a press, spreading them out to dry while also safeguarding them from raiding ants and marauding crows. The oil has to be heated just right so the vadams fluff out to a golden fullness and make everyone's mouth water when they are brought to the table. And what do we do then? We pop them into our mouths, and in 2 bites, they're gone. After all that build-up in books and movies and all the wink-wink from aunts and cousins about breaking the bedstead and making the earth move, etc., I had expected more from sex than the 2 bites and gone experience. But as everyone knows, vadams just add the crunch factor to a meal. They cannot be the meal itself.
Beautifully ingenious. So I was talking about the context of digital arrest in the story, the land of lost content. So when we connect this particular story to the festival theme of ours, the paradox of pace, I think it's very, very pertinent. The protagonist here, Urvashi, she's a social media influencer. And the narrative of this particular story offers a sharp and very subtle satire of the influencer culture and media collapse that we encounter these days. Especially memorable in this particular line, that was before journalists stopped being journalists and media houses turned into mouthpieces for plutocrats and their sycophants. So, in the wake of the recent controversies around influencer culture wreaking havoc across the social media network in our state over the suicide of a young man, how would you consider the accelerated pace of digital life that we are in? Does it make ethical responsibility quite easier to evade?
So I believe in the power of social media. I believe that social media can be used in a great way, in a wonderful way, to actually, I would think, to open up the world. So unfortunately, for a long time, if you only had access to a media platform or so, did you have a place to present your opinion? But what social media did was that it created a space for everybody to speak their mind, speak their voice. But at some point, it stopped being that, and then it became more about social media became a commercial enterprise. So the commercial enterprise is what actually I think affects the ethical realm of social media influence, because if you are looking at how do you improve your ratings or improve your follower base, then you're going to do anything like a clickbait to kind of get more attention and people to your page and to your handle and so on. And I think there is a thing about what happens is that social media has to be used responsibly, because unfortunately what it can do is that one outlier can completely wreck what for decades and decades people have been fighting for. Now, one of the instances, of course, is this. I mean, I know that it's still a case in pending, that nothing has been, uh, nobody has arrived at any conclusive points of view about the latest scandal or the controversy. I wouldn't say controversy, but I would say this horrific case of this girl. Probably, according to one part of social media, which says that she doctored the videos, another part says that she didn't, and about this young man who killed himself because he couldn't bear the humiliation of having his name, spread everywhere with negative implications attached to it. And I would think that what has happened is, whether it's happened or not, that a lot of young men and men themselves are turning around and talking about the need for men's rights, which I agree with. Yes, there are a lot of men's rights issues too which need to be tackled. But the problem is that countless women have, for the last 50, 60 years in India, tried to create a space where women have a voice. And that voice has been, destroyed by one probably careless act. So everything, the credibility of that voice has been affected because of this. So that is where I think we need to draw a line about social media, and that just because there are 200,000 followers or 500,000 followers, that doesn't make them prophets, doesn't make them, wise people. They have something about either their body or their language style or whatever that brings people into their page. And if you go in one of the things that I'm sure all of you would have done it, is that when you see that there is a celebrity with a huge following, I'm talking of social media celebrities, I'm not talking about celebrities who also use social media. If you look at the comment section, there's so much hate there. There's so much hate, so much vitriol. And I would think about these young men and women, because most of them are young men and women. What makes them want to lay themselves open to this kind of ugliness, really? And so I believe that go ahead, use social media, have fun with it. There's so much fun you can have with it. You can even do something good with it, but don't see it as a way of defining who you are. So that is where the problem is, because it's not real. Ultimately, when you stand in front of the camera and you're looking at your phone camera and you're talking and you're saying this and that, and then do you actually follow it? Do you actually exercise it? So I would think that the ethical responsibility is an area that all social media users have to kind of make a note of in their minds.
It reminds us of our ethical responsibility, the demands that our times make of us, and our ethical responsibility as readers too, and again as writers. And as a responsible writer, I believe you get into a large amount of meticulous research behind every single writing of yours. For instance, the Idris, it's a historical fiction set in 17th century Malabar. Then again, your crime fiction, which is taken more or less, or rather as a beautiful tool for connecting with the times. A lot of field work was involved over there, and in all these stories too. So how is this possible, that is balancing meticulous research with aesthetic freedom?
See, research has to just stay as research. That is just to kind of pad the novel, to give you atmosphere, to give you details, but research cannot be the whole novel, because then it's like reading a dissertation paper. I don't need to read a dissertation paper on, let's say, 15th century Kerala or 16th century, Machilipatnam. I don't need to read a dissertation on women's rights. I don't need to read a dissertation on child trafficking. But if I were to tell it as a story, then what happens is that my reader understands it better, feels it better, and when you feel it, the response that you have to a story or a situation becomes that much more real and that much more tangible. So I think research has to be used, is a great tool, but research is just a tool. It's not the whole story. You want to open for questions? You want to open for questions?
Yeah. I think I'm running out of time, but before I leave it open to the audience to ask our writer questions, I would say that the pleasure of reading her is as much great as listening to her Malayalam. So allow me this selfishness. ഒരു ചോദ്യം ഞാൻ മലയാളത്തിൽ ചോദിക്കട്ടെ. സോ ഈ റീജിയണൽ പ്രാദേശികമായ രുചിഭേദങ്ങൾ മാത്രമല്ല, ഭാഷയുടെ വ്യത്യാസങ്ങളും അതിൻ്റെ രുചികളും വളരെ കൃത്യമായിട്ട് മാമിൻ്റെ റൈറ്റിങ്സിൽ കാണാറുണ്ട്. ഈ ട്രാൻസ്ലേഷൻ ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ എനി ചാത്തൻ ആൻഡ് പോത്തൻ ക്യാൻ ഡു ഇറ്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. പിന്നെ ചെമ്മീൻ ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്തിരുന്നു. മലയാളം ആധികാരികമായിട്ട് പഠിച്ചിട്ടില്ലെങ്കിൽ പോലും യു ആർ ഡയറിങ് ഇൻ ടു ദോസ് കൈൻഡ്സ് ഓഫ് ഡൊമെയിൻസ്. അപ്പോൾ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ചെമ്മീനിൽ ഇതുപോലെ എൻ്റെ പൊന്നിൻ കുടമേ എന്നുള്ളത് ദ പോട്ട് ഓഫ് ഗോൾഡ് എന്നാക്കി മാറ്റി, എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഈ പ്രാദേശിക ഭേദങ്ങളെ ഒരു അരുചി പോലും തോന്നാത്ത വിധത്തിൽ ആ ഫ്ലേവർ മുഴുവനായി അലിയിച്ചെടുക്കുന്ന വിധത്തിൽ ചേർക്കാൻ കഴിയുന്നത്?
ഓക്കെ, രണ്ട് കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഇതുണ്ട്. ഒന്ന്, ഞാൻ മലയാളമാണ് വീട്ടിൽ സംസാരിക്കുന്നത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് മലയാളം നല്ലപോലെ സംസാരിക്കാൻ അറിയാൻ പഠിച്ചിട്ടില്ല. അതുകൊണ്ട് എഴുതാൻ അറിയില്ല. വായിക്കും, ധാരാളം വായിക്കും. പക്ഷേ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞില്ലേ, ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ മുണ്ടകോട്ടുകുറിശി എന്ന് പറയുന്ന സ്ഥലത്ത് ഇന്നും ഞങ്ങൾ വർത്തമാനം പറയുന്ന മലയാളം ഭയങ്കര ഒരു പഴയ സ്റ്റൈലിൻ്റെ മലയാളമാണ്. അതിൽ കുറേ വേണമെങ്കിൽ പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ ന്യൂവാൻസസ് ഒക്കെ ജനങ്ങൾക്ക് കാണാം. പക്ഷേ ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് അതൊന്നും അറിയില്ല. ഞങ്ങളെന്നും എന്താ പറയുക, സംസാരിക്കുന്ന മലയാളം, ഞങ്ങൾ പറയുന്ന ചില കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഞങ്ങൾ ഇന്നും എൻ്റെ ചെറിയച്ഛനൊക്കെ മുട്ടാന്നൊന്നല്ല പറയുക, മുടുക എന്നാണ് പറയുക. അത് VKൻ്റെ വായിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് അറിയാം. അങ്ങനത്തെ പഴയ മലയാളമാണ് ഞങ്ങൾ ഇപ്പോഴും പറയണം അവിടെ. അപ്പോൾ എൻ്റെ മനസ്സിൽ എന്താ വെച്ചാൽ രണ്ട് ഭാഷകളാണ് പാരലായിട്ട് ഓടുന്നത്. ഇംഗ്ലീഷും ഓടുന്നുണ്ട്, മലയാളവും ഓടുന്നുണ്ട്. പിന്നെ ഞാൻ പഠിച്ച എൻ്റെ സെക്കൻഡ് ലാംഗ്വേജ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഹിന്ദിയായിരുന്നു. അപ്പോൾ അതും ഓടുന്നുണ്ട് എൻ്റെ തലയിൽ. അതുകൊണ്ട് പിന്നെ തമിഴ് ഞാൻ തമിഴ്നാട്ടിൽ ജനിച്ചല്ല അവിടെ വളർന്ന കാരണം തമിഴും പറയും. അതുകൊണ്ട് ഈ കുറേ ഭാഷകൾ കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ ഓട്ടോമാറ്റിക്കലി എൻ്റെ തലയിൽ ഇങ്ങനെ ട്രാൻസ്ലേഷൻ നടക്കും. ഇപ്പോൾ എൻ്റെ വീട്ടിൽ, ഇപ്പോൾ ഫോർ ഇൻസ്റ്റൻസ് എൻ്റെ വീട്ടിൽ ബാംഗ്ലൂരിൽ ഇപ്പോൾ എൻ്റെ അടുത്ത് അവിടെ ജോലിക്ക് നിൽക്കുന്ന ആൾക്കാരെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഒരാൾ ഹിന്ദിയാണ് പറയണത്, വേറൊരാൾ നേപ്പാളിയാണ് പറയണത്, വേറൊരാൾ തമിഴാണ് പറയണത്. അപ്പോൾ ഇവരോടൊക്കെ ഒരു സെൻറ്റൻസിൽ ഞാൻ പറയുമ്പോൾ ചിലപ്പോൾ 4 ഭാഷയാണ് ഒരുമിച്ച് ഞാൻ പറയണത്, ഇംഗ്ലീഷും വരില്ല എവിടെയെങ്കിലും. അപ്പോൾ ഓട്ടോമാറ്റിക്കലി എനിക്കത് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നുണ്ട് എൻ്റെ തലയിൽ. ഈ എന്താ പറയുക, ഈ ഭാഷകൾ ഇങ്ങനെ വിവർത്തനം ചെയ്തും കൊണ്ട് സംസാരിക്കുക. അപ്പോൾ അത് ഐ തിങ്ക് ആ ഭാഷ കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഒരു എന്താ പറയുക, തൻ്റെ ഇടം വേണമെന്ന് ഞാൻ പറയും. നമ്മളിങ്ങനെ പേടിച്ചിരിക്കുക, അയ്യോ വേറെ ആൾക്കാർ തെറ്റിദ്ധരിക്കില്ലോ നമ്മളിങ്ങനെ പറഞ്ഞാൽ അപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ ആദ്യം എല്ലാവരുടെ അടുത്തും മുൻകൂർ ജാമ്യം എടുക്കും. ഞാൻ പറയും, എനിക്ക് ഈ ഭാഷ ഇത്രേ അറിയുള്ളൂ, അപ്പോൾ എന്തെങ്കിലും തെറ്റ് വന്നു വെച്ചാൽ ക്ഷമിക്കുക, അത് ഉദ്ദേശിച്ചിട്ടൊന്നുമല്ല അങ്ങനെ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞത്. എനിക്ക് ഇപ്പം ഞാൻ പറയുന്ന കാര്യം നിങ്ങൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കണം, അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഈ ഭാഷയിൽ ഞാൻ പറയണത്. അപ്പോൾ ആ ഒരു സെൻസിറ്റിവിറ്റിയാണ് ഞാൻ എഴുതണ എന്താ പറയുക ഇംഗ്ലീഷിലും വരുന്നത്. കാരണം മലയാളം എനിക്ക് നല്ലോണം അറിയാം. മലയാളം എന്താ പറയുക, ഞാനിപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ പറയും ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ഇസ് മൈ എന്താ പറയുക മൈൻഡ് ലാംഗ്വേജ്, പക്ഷേ മലയാളം ഇസ് മൈ ഹാർട്ട് ലാംഗ്വേജ്. അപ്പോൾ എൻ്റെ മനസ്സിൽ കിടക്കുന്നത് മുഴുവൻ മലയാളമാണ്. പക്ഷേ പഠിച്ച കാരണം ഇംഗ്ലീഷാണ് പഠിച്ചത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് അതാണ് എനിക്ക് ഏറ്റവും എളുപ്പമായിട്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് I can just kind of flit between these spaces. ഒരു വലിയ പ്രശ്നമില്ലാതെ.
Thank you, ma'am, for taking us across these worlds that are intimate and unsettling, worlds that are deeply rooted and fiercely contemporary. Thank you for trusting us with these lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now I open it out to the public.
You see, recently a Director General's wife killed her husband, very recently, in Bangalore. You must have known it. And an IAS officer, falling in love with a fellow IAS officer, killed himself. He was a married man. And what is the plight of his wife? Has this been analyzed in any of the writings you had? or have you thought of this?
For instance, if you read the title story, Why I Killed My Husband,
Ah.
they're probably, it's not the story about the Director General of Police and whose wife killed him, but this is about what drives a woman to take this extreme step. Okay, so that, yes, I have.
Yes.
I think I pretty much covered almost every aspect of the female experience in all ages.
I just wanted to say that I was 15 when Lady Scoop Taylor was like, I read it at 15. I don't know if it was a right parenting move for my mother to let me read that when I was 15, because a lot of things I didn't have personal experiences like many of the women in the book. And now I'm 40, I'm reading similar stories, so I can like think that these things happened. So it's more like, I don't know if you really understand, like for me, a chunk of my life, I have held this very close to my life. Do you really fathom that women over different age groups from like 15 to 40 really like hold these experiences so close?
I do actually, because it's a very humbling experience for me as a writer, because I create a book, I create a set of characters, and these characters, while because I created them, they live with me, but it's very humbling to know that they also live with my readers, and that they occupy a very strong place in their lives. And this is something that I've seen again and again happen to me, whichever part of the world I'm in, where there is always somebody who's going to turn up and say that, how did you know this is my story? Sometimes it's an experience that I have written about, which probably echoes something in their life. And sometimes it's about somebody like you, for a younger person, who uses this book to kind of help them clarify a situation in their head. So, as a writer who didn't set out to do any of these things but just tell a story about things that made me uncomfortable, I am overwhelmed.
What kind of inspired in your writing left politics in around the world? Left politics.
So,
Inspired.
what do I think about left politics?
Yes.
Well, I truly believe that all of us need to live in a socialist state. Okay, I'm not a hardcore believer of the communist ideology. Neither am I a hardcore believer neither am I a believer, not hardcore. I'm not a believer of right-wing ideology. None of it. But I truly believe that every human being has a right to live in this world and live well. And I do believe in that there should be some kind of a pattern about distribution of wealth, because when you see, for instance, all of us know about the Ambani wedding, the kind of money that was thrown, and you think about people starving in Orissa and people starving in Jharkhand and places like that, Karnataka, parts of Karnataka, and you think half of, even 1/4 of that money would have fed 100 villages. And that makes me angry, but what does one do about it? I write about it. That's what I do.